He's tall, he's dark, and he's been spotted everywhere from Australia to the Himalayas. Exactly who or what is the wild man of mystery we call Bigfoot? And does he exist outside of our imaginations?
After examining the physical evidence, I can tell you for sure that there is an animal out there.
Can you rule out a human being engaged in some sort of hijinks from being behind that evidence?
Believers and skeptics alike examine the evidence. Frightening encounters.
I've never seen nothing like it in my life. I don't think I'll ever camp again.
Giant tracks.
These footprints exist. Something is making them.
And the film that won't go away.
You know, it was so hot inside that suit, and the sweat was just rolling off me.
They don't get shot by hunters, they don't get hit by cars, they're not found dead, they're not found alive. Where are they?
We follow the forensic trail and take part in a real Sasquatch stakeout as science goes after that most elusive of legends, Bigfoot. It's basic biological fact. If there's one Bigfoot, there must be thousands. Otherwise, they would have become extinct a long time ago. But is there any reason to believe that these creatures actually exist? Every year, there are dozens of new Bigfoot sightings. Many from witnesses rational enough to know the difference between a bear and a giant two-legged ape. Bigfoot tracks have been documented for the last 50 years, a few showing what some scientists are convinced are the anatomical signatures of a large bipedal primate.
Do we have pieces of evidence that people claim indicate that there's a giant hairy monster running around North America? Yes, there's evidence. There's all kinds of evidence. But the question you have to ask isn't whether there's evidence, is any of this evidence any good?
I'm compelled to conclude that there's a very high probability that this creature exists.
Real or myth, something very strange is going on. Either the most important zoological discovery of our time is living in secrecy, eluding modern science, or a lot of imaginative people are stalking our forests, architects of a con that has taken on a life of its own. Our search for the truth behind Bigfoot begins in the forbidding mountains of Northern California, known as Six Rivers National Forest. In the past 50 years, there have probably been more Bigfoot tracks found and Bigfoot sightings reported here than in any other region on Earth. Back in 1958, some of the first tracks were discovered on a construction site. The media jumped on the story, and the local term, Bigfoot, became a household word. Bigfoot gave the little community of nearby Willow Creek a modest claim to fame. On the morning of the annual Bigfoot parade, the town always turns out in force. But is the local Bigfoot legend just good for business, or do the people who live here think there's more to it than that?
I was here firsthand. I do believe in it. We here know the truth. The others can think whatever they want. I believe in it.
Yeah, it's a true story. No, there's somebody out there.
I have a heavy one there.
Do you think Bigfoot's real?
Actually, no, I don't.
Yes, he is.
The town of Willow Creek has its skeptics and its believers. The nearby National Park Service headquarters doesn't hold an official position on Bigfoot, but Ranger John McDonald has his own opinions.
From what I've heard from various sources that don't know each other, I think there's some credibility there. And I think it's worth looking for. I mean, we spend a lot of money looking for life on other planets, but we have no evidence whatsoever that it exists. We have more evidence that Bigfoot exists than life on other planets exists, and we're looking for life on other planets, so why not pursue this? People do not realize is there is a lot of remote area up here, really remote.
But is it remote enough? Many biologists say that a minimum breeding population of large primates would number in the thousands, too many to escape detection. But fire lookout Rebecca Cape has spent 20 years watching over these mountains, and she isn't so sure.
There's plenty of room, plenty of places to hide. I probably get about 3 to 4 Bigfoot stories a season up here. Most of them are hunters. They've been scared out of the woods by a scream, maybe something very big.
The fact of the matter is that many people have encounters or see things that fit into this profile of an upright, broad-shouldered, flat-faced, hair-covered figure. Many of them just don't talk about it.
People shouldn't underestimate the emotional power of a Bigfoot sighting. All these stories and anecdotes are at their core just eyewitness testimony. It doesn't mean that you dismiss it out of hand, but it means that you need to be careful about how much weight you give it.
Those who believe they've encountered Bigfoot all agree that it's a life-changing experience, including people not usually prone to panic, like Highway Patrolman Richard Cale.
That August day I was up there and I cut a pickup load of firewood and finished up and loaded my truck, and I just started down the hill down this logging road. I was coming around a slight left-hand bend in the road, and then I saw a very, very large thing on 2 legs moving quickly in an upright position. This must sound crazy. I'd say 8 or 9 feet tall. It was big. This was not a beautiful coat. This was really looked like a mess. But you could still see the muscles working under it. It was impressive. And it was gone just like that. I don't know what I saw. I know what I didn't see. I didn't see a human, and I didn't see a bear. I've seen lots of bears. It was not a bear.
Catherine Markover was camping with her sister on a Californian mountaintop. They were concerned about bears until something much more frightening appeared.
There was no one around, no one at all. My sister was a little scared, thinking a bear was going to get us. Sounds funny. I made her a bed in the back of the Jeep, and she was settling in. I looked out the window, and I thought I seen something and took a second look, and there was Bigfoot, as big as day. I've never seen a torso that big in my whole life. It wasn't only that it was so tall, it was the broad shoulders. I've never seen nothing like it in my life. It scared me so bad. I flew down the mountain as fast as I could go. Never in my life would I ever dream there was a Bigfoot.
Many Bigfoot eyewitnesses seem perfectly rational people, but eyewitness testimony is notoriously inaccurate, especially when people are frightened.
There is recent research that has suggested that in the conditions of stress and fear, as you would expect, happens in Bigfoot sightings, that the brain actually does an even worse job of remembering what it sees. The brain secretes an enzyme called PKC that actually inhibits concentration and memory, and short-term memory. So really, eyewitness testimony is not reliable. Police detectives know this, lawyers know this, psychologists know this. There's nothing shocking about it, but the problem is that when you apply that to Bigfoot sightings, it's even less reliable.
Eyewitness accounts are one thing, but eyewitnesses who conveniently, perhaps too conveniently, have a camera with them are another thing altogether. This was the case in 1967, when 2 cowboys and avowed Bigfoot fans went in search of the creature, and apparently captured it on film. They recorded a giant hairy female in full stride, a creature that was to become the poster child for the Bigfoot movement. This is the story behind this remarkable footage. It was October 1967. Bigfoot-obsessed rodeo cowboy Roger Patterson was fighting cancer. He was broke, but dreamed of making a lot of money by selling a documentary on Sasquatch to a Hollywood studio. The problem was, Hollywood wasn't returning his calls. Undeterred, he rented a film camera, and he and his rodeo friend Bob Gimlin headed into the wilds of Northern California. They spent several weeks scouring the mountains of Six Rivers National Forest, where they knew many tracks had been found over the years. What happened next, depending on who you talk to, was either one of the most important scientific discoveries of the 20th century or a brilliant hoax. A few hours into their ride, Patterson and Gimlin said they noticed a nasty smell in the air, and their horses became skittish. Urging them on, they came around a bend in the trail and saw an immense creature rise up from a creek. Patterson's horse reared and he fell. Scrambling up, he got out his camera and began to head after the creature. This is how the famous footage unfolds. Patterson apparently struggles to locate the creature. But as the camera settles down, there it is. At first barely visible in the distance, a giant, hairy, upright figure. Patterson chases after it and finally gets a more detailed look. His subject, apparently a female, strides across a sandbar, then turns and looks directly at the camera. And here, in frame number 352, she reveals a face that many Bigfoot enthusiasts claim cannot possibly be a fake. In barely a minute, it was over. Patterson and Gimlin made casts of the creature's tracks and unleashed their evidence on the world. Roger Patterson eventually died of cancer in 1972, but his fleeting images still refused to go away. Most scientists dismissed the film out of hand, saying it was obviously a human in a suit. But enthusiasts still obsess over the film, frame by frame. And even established scientists, like anthropologist Jeff Meldrum, believe there might be more to it than first meets the eye.
To trivialize that piece of evidence as nothing more than a man in a fur suit is to diminish the significance of it, and to reveal a lack of appreciation of the sophistication of that piece of evidence. Because indeed, if it is a hoax, it's by far the most elaborate and sophisticated accomplishment that I've ever seen.
Later, we'll dissect the film and the tracks in greater detail. But first we ask the big question. If Bigfoot exists, what on earth is it? Meldrum believes it may be a descendant of Gigantopithecus, a giant extinct ape identified only from a handful of fossils.
If that's the case, then what we're dealing with is simply a parallel story of a large terrestrial hominoid, or ape, not human ancestor, but an ape ancestor, that evolved in a very similar direction as was experienced by early hominids in Africa under similar ecological conditions. So it will add a chapter which will provide interesting insights into our evolutionary history.
But skeptics point out that Bigfoot sightings are a worldwide phenomenon, which probably indicates a different genesis, the human imagination. Ancient wild man legends are common to almost every wilderness area on Earth. Native Americans call him Sasquatch. Australia claims the Yowie. Borneo has the Mayas. In Mongolia and Russia, there are numerous accounts of Almasti, a ferocious hominid that some Russian scientists have suggested may be the descendant of Neanderthal. But of course, Bigfoot's most famous cousin, and possibly inspiration, is the Yeti. In 1951, a reconnaissance expedition to Mount Everest found a set of mysterious tracks on a glacier at 5,500 meters. Expedition leader Eric Shipton, a highly respected climber, published a report in the Times of London. Yeti folklore was reborn as the abominable snowman, but major expeditions in search of the creature all failed to find it. Everest hero Sir Edmund Hillary would later conclude that the tracks were those of ordinary animals distorted by melting snow. But the public's imagination was already captured. Was it this sensational news story that inspired the modern era of Bigfoot sightings in North America? To answer this question, we tried to get to the bottom of the Bigfoot evidence. The giant footprints. Are they real or are they fake? Forensic experts, primatologists and anthropologists have come up with some intriguing and contradictory theories. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of giant footprint plaster casts have been taken over the years in an effort to prove the existence of Bigfoot. Not even Bigfoot believers think all the casts are genuine, so clearly there are some people out there with too much time on their hands and a penchant for creating mischief. Sometimes the mischief makers are revealed. In 2001, a story from Washington's Cascade Mountains caused a huge uproar in the Bigfoot community. It was the story of Ray Wallace. Ray was apparently a serial planter of Bigfoot tracks, dating back to the 1950s, when he and his family lived in Northern California. The tracks that sparked the Bigfoot craze in 1958 were discovered on one of his construction sites, and apparently this was no coincidence. As the story goes, Ray and his family moved from job to job up and down the Northwest, and the suspicious tracks followed them wherever they went. Don Boswell was one of Ray's close friends and confidants.
But I think they've been worn down.
It's a matter of making tracks and letting people discover them is what it boiled down to, and it was pretty effective.
Ray managed to keep his secret from his own son Michael, who only discovered his father's handiwork after he had died.
And this is what they used to do their pranks. They've had a lot of use.
Ray's wife Elna put up with his hobby for over 50 years.
I told him it was all right to do that, but I said you might get in trouble. He said, oh, I'm not going to get in trouble.
Ray's younger cousin Dale Lee also knew about the scam.
He would never admit that he did anything. Absolutely. In fact, none of them would.
There was a lot of other guys that worked with Dad, and they were involved, in making prints.
I mean, he was full of it. There ain't no doubt about that. And that's the thing we did with Bigfoot. He was just constantly doing something when he had the chance,
And they had straps on them, and we'd put them on our feet. It was pretty effective.
Well, one of their favorites, I think, was to get on the rope behind a pickup. It would kind of give them momentum to make these big strides, and some of these guys were pretty big fellas.
You drive slow, and you just take these long steps,
Dad had all kinds of casts. He had good ones, he had bad ones. I mean, just like any artist.
He usually did it in the basement, and he'd be down there for hours. He was kind of a perfectionist, and each toe and everything had to be just so.
He was developing a suit. He was working on a suit. He had Mom in one once, and she was.
I said, I'm not going to put that suit on. I said, look at that hill over there. If someone come over that hill, they'll shoot me.
He went as far as he could possibly go, and figured on going a lot further if he hadn't have got sick.
Ray's tracks may have sparked the Bigfoot craze. But the existence of hoaxers doesn't necessarily rule out the existence of Bigfoot. 2,000 miles away in Conroe, Texas, a forensic detective is on the Sasquatch case. Jimmy Chilcutt is a latent fingerprint expert with an unusual hobby. He's one of the few specialists who is also an expert on primate prints.
My job is to catch bad guys in Conroe, Texas. So I'm not out there and look for Bigfoot.
But a few years ago, just for fun, he began to examine casts of Bigfoot prints. To his amazement, he found that some of the casts had dermal or friction ridges, which are like fingerprints, on the bottom of the feet. This was the beginning of his transformation from skeptic to believer.
And I started to examine it and notice actual friction ridges that ran lengthwise down the foot. And the dermal ridges, the texture is about twice the thickness of a human. In humans, the ridge pattern goes across the width of the foot. In this cast, they go down the side of the foot. You know, this is something that we deal with every day. And when we see a ridge pattern flow that's completely opposite of human beings, then yeah, that is kind of shocking.
Jimmy was certain that he was looking at the print of an unknown primate. It came from California in 1967. But, even more surprisingly, Jimmy found another cast with the same ridge pattern. It was taken hundreds of miles away in Walla Walla, Washington, 20 years later. And there was more.
It had scars. And scars would be the most difficult thing to fake. Most people don't know it, but when you cut your finger below the epidermis, the friction ridges, as they heal, curl inward. And that's the same thing we have on the Walla Walla cast. You'll notice the scar and the friction ridges curling inward. And this is something that I won't say it can't be faked, but it would be very difficult, and the person faking would have to have a vast knowledge of biology and friction ridges.
Chilcott's conclusion?
The evidence as I've examined is proof positive to me that there is an animal out there, some sort of primate running around in the Pacific Northwest.
But Dr. Esteban Sarmiento disagrees. He's a man who knows his primate prints, and he's not afraid to get a bit of dirt on his hands to prove it.
As far as the cast of the footprints of Sasquatch, what I see is there's not a lot of consistency with the prints. And that gives another reason to maybe suspect that they could be manufactured.
An expert in primate anatomy, Sarmiento has spent the last 2 years in Africa chasing big apes. He decided to use his expertise to see if he could fake Bigfoot tracks for himself.
A footprint with dermal ridges can be faked in a number of different ways. What I did in this case is I made a mold of a Bigfoot print, and I took imprints of dermal ridges of baboons, orangutans, and humans, and I stamped them on my mold.
Using this technique, Dr. Sarmiento can stamp dermal ridges and even scar tissue in whatever direction he likes on the soles of the cast.
The other thing I can do is I can make a blow-up of my own foot.
He does this by making a mold of his foot in silicone, then soaking it in paint thinner. The silicone soaks up the paint thinner like a sponge, and the result is a very big foot.
I don't do this every day. It's not like my job. I think it's probably reached its limit, huh? This one I soaked for about 4 hours to get from this size to this size. You have the ball of the foot here, and you can see pretty good the details of the dermal ridge, especially like right there, huh? That looks like pretty good dermal ridge there. And I can really keep this process up indefinitely. I can keep on making casts of this and making it bigger and making another one and making it bigger ad infinitum. I can make one as big as this. It just would take the time and the effort, a little extra time.
So even the most convincing of Bigfoot prints could be faked by someone with enough expertise and energy.
Look at how much plaster this thing's taking.
But why would anyone put so much time and effort into a hoax?
I think the mistake that the advocates have always made is they've underestimated the ingenuity and resourcefulness of hoaxers. They assume that somebody is being dishonest or socially irresponsible, that they also must be stupid and incompetent. And I don't think that's the case at all. Some of these hoaxers are very, very creative, and scientists aren't used to looking at things this way.
Skeptics and believers all agree that the most compelling Bigfoot tracks and sightings have occurred in the American Northwest. But Bigfoot has been sighted from Florida to Alaska and just about everywhere in between. And his personality seems to vary as much as his habitat. We're on our way to the bayous of Texas in search of a different kind of Bigfoot, one with a bad attitude. And he's the target of a hunt where the mission is shoot to kill. This is the Bottomlands, a patch of swamp forest in eastern Texas near the border of Louisiana. And it's here that the southern Sasquatch may be making its last stand. We're about to join a hunt that aims to shoot one. Our guide will be longtime Bigfoot researcher, hunter, and talk radio host Chester Moore.
Welcome back to the Outdoor Show. We're talking about the kingpin, the grand poobah, the king of all cryptozoology, Bigfoot creatures. Bigfoot. They'll say, well, what are the differences between the creatures reported in the Northwest and the ones over here? I said, well, the ones in California are a bunch of tree-hugging hippie, sandal-wearing Bigfoots singing their kumbaya around the campfire and holding hands. Ours listen to Black Sabbath and want to rip your head off. We got big, redneck, crazy, heavy metal Bigfoots. There's a real animal, a primate, that just happened to be very intelligent and very fortunate we hadn't bagged one yet.
Chester's home in Sweetwater, Texas is a taxidermist's dream, but the carcass he wants the most still eludes him.
We need to touch him up a little bit, Chester.
He and fellow Bigfoot researcher Chris Stevens hope that one day, for the sake of conservation, they'll bring in a corpse and be able to settle the matter of Bigfoot's existence once and for all.
This is a southern,
But time may be running out. Instead of the usual 5-toed Bigfoot, they've recently been finding 3-toed tracks. They now suspect that humans are taking a toll on southern Bigfoot's habitat and his sunny disposition.
What I think is happening is I think you're having groups of these animals that are being basically genetically isolated and forced to inbreed to exist. And one of the first things that happens to even humans, weird things happen to your digits when you start inbreeding. And one of the things that inbreeding does to a lot of animals is make them more aggressive.
Late in the afternoon, Chris, Chester, and Chester's father, Chester Sr., head out into the bayou with a view to a kill. None of them has ever laid eyes on Bigfoot, but they know people who have, and they're pretty sure Bigfoot has laid eyes on them. No matter how dangerous southern Bigfoot may be, there's too much at stake for them to give up on the creatures.
There's a big controversy in the Bigfoot community about whether or not we should harvest an animal, kill an animal, to prove finally once and for all that they exist. And I am definitely pro-kill. I think that we should kill an animal, prove that they exist so that we can protect their habitat.
I'm going to mourn the kill, because it's not something I want to go out and shoot and hang on my wall, but at the same time, you got to do this for the good of the species.
After several hours and no sign or sound of Sasquatch, the hunting party moves on, guns at the ready. The next stakeout spot, according to Chester, is the place they've had some of their strangest encounters.
It's a real promising spot over here. There have been all kind of vocalizations heard right in the zone from people. It's the only spot I go to that gives me the creeps. It's a very dark set of woods. It's got a real creepy, intense vibe to it.
It often happens that the hunters eventually begin to feel like the hunted.
I keep hearing something moving around back there.
Something walking around right now. Get whatever it was followed us in.
One thing, when you're out here and you're not sure if the animal exists. It's another thing when you know that the animal out here is 7 or 8 feet tall and perfectly capable of ripping your arms off.
We've had sticks thrown at us. We've had all kind of wild stuff happen.
Apparently, something may be trying to encourage them to leave.
This tree was placed here while we were over there. It wasn't here before. It was placed in the middle of the trail.
They've been out here in the dead of night for hours, convinced that Bigfoot is nearby. But finally, as dawn approaches, they decide it's time to go. Bigfoot declined to put in an appearance this time, perhaps not realizing that by sacrificing himself, he could save his species. But Chester is undeterred.
I'm honored that I'm able to have this kind of close encounter with one of God's most amazing creatures. I mean, that's cool.
From the gentle Bigfoot of the American Northwest to the killer Texan Bigfoot, we now travel to Tennessee, where Bigfoot can be surprisingly sociable.
The fact that Bigfoot takes on a different persona depending on what region you're from is actually to be expected, because if Bigfoot is in fact more of a social construct than a real creature, that would explain why.
Here in the Smoky Mountains, a southern Bigfoot clan is alive and well, at least in the heart and mind of Janice Carter. She claims to have grown up with an entire Bigfoot colony, who first started visiting her grandfather 60 years ago. It might sound like tabloid fantasy, but her guest, Russian researcher Igor Bortsev, thinks she's genuine. 50 years ago, Igor was among the investigators who dug up and studied the remains of Quit, the supposed half-breed son of a Russian Bigfoot mother and a human father. When he heard about Janice, he had to come to America to investigate.
It was so exciting that we could not ignore this, because now we understand that she is a unique woman. She is only expert in the world who knows so much things about these creatures. She is like Jane Goodall for the chimpanzee.
She was here in 99.
Janice's Bigfoot family is apparently so large that Igor is having trouble keeping track of them all.
And what that means, Bo has no any children.
He's trying to map out their genealogy.
But now Shay is Nikki's son. Nikki has
Janice claims that she's known Fox, the colony's patriarch, since she was 4.
I don't see how he could be Fox's son. And Fox is black and has black skin, and how can...
But her story has been greeted with skepticism, even within the Bigfoot community. Janice has been trying to gather evidence, but it's difficult, as Fox and the others are extremely camera shy. But she did manage to gather some hair samples, which she got from Fox when he came to her door.
March the 23rd of this year, he knocked on the door here, and he wanted garlic. They use garlic to keep mosquitoes and bugs off of them, and also I guess it's good for fleas and stuff too. But anyhow, he asked for garlic, and I asked him if he wanted powdered garlic, and he said no, he wanted the clove, and I happen to have some.
Does he speak English?
He speaks English, yes.
What's his voice sound like?
Very deep and gurgler. It's like, for him to say hello, it's like, ow. So I just eased up here. He reached out his hand, still had it like this, reached up, went to put the garlic in his hand, and reached up to this and pulled hair out of his wrist. His eyes got really big, and I'm standing here like this, and he said, thank you. Went down the bank and said, okay, we got it.
As a child, Janice spent a lot of time watching the Bigfoot family in the wild, so she's Igor's key to understanding how they survive.
Spent more time in the trees watching them than I did playing or doing anything. I was out from daylight to dark and just sitting up in the trees listening and watching.
Janice claims to have witnessed the Bigfoot clan hunting on many occasions.
They hunt in relays. The first one will run the deer toward that one, and that one will run it out in the open. They're faster on all fours than what they are on 2 feet. We clocked hogs at 45 miles an hour on all fours.
Igor offers to reenact the Bigfoot takedown technique.
The one that initiates the kill then starts chasing the deer. Reach out, grab the back leg, snap it in 2. Reach up with the other hand to under the chin, and push and force the head back until the neck breaks. Then they'll take their fingernails, which are really sharp,
and slit the belly to take the innards out. Reach in, pull the liver out, and the heart. When I was little, it bothered me really bad, and it still bothers me. I don't want to see them kill anything because it's gruesome, but I've sort of grown used to it.
Janice knows that people think she's living in a fantasy world, but she maintains that Fox and the others are real, and they're family.
They're very highly intelligent, and they do use a language. They have a culture.
I think what we're left with is that Bigfoot is a mythological creature. I don't think Bigfoot is a biological problem. What I think it is, it's a very interesting cultural anthropological problem and a very interesting psychological problem.
But how does psychology explain the 24 feet of film that has been the centerpiece of the Bigfoot argument for more than 35 years? And how will that film stand up to scrutiny in the digital age? You might be surprised.
And hopefully the rest of the community is that kind of thing, you know.
Back in Texas, Bigfoot hunter Chester Moore has invited his friend and fellow enthusiast, M.K. Davis, to help him examine the famous Patterson-Gimlin film. Davis is an amateur astronomer and has used sky-watching techniques to dissect our very down-to-earth Sasquatch.
Basically, technology has caught up with this film. This is a digital world, and you're able to do wonderful things through digital analysis. There you see it blinking its eye, and you see a scar on the forehead actually going up and down as well as the eye blinking.
That's not consistent with a stiff, rigid rubber costume.
Not at all. It's only 2 frames apart, and you're looking at that kind of movement there, you're looking at something that's extremely dynamic. Of course, I've got the head stabilized, and that makes all this facial movement very easy to see. And right here on this far corner of the mouth, the lips part, displaying these huge, blocky looking teeth.
I've never seen anything remotely this clear. You know, that's the stunning thing to me, is the clarity. I mean, it's almost like looking at a different film, you know.
Now, what I did right here was to take 2 images. These are close-ups of the breasts, and a lot of people have argued over the years about, are they really breasts? Or is it just a big male Bigfoot? What I was working on here was to see just how much those breasts were swinging, how much movement, natural movement that you would see. So you can see right here where it's been stabilized. That doesn't move. The only movement you're going to see is breast movement. And they're flopping. These are 2-frame blinks is what I call them. And this technique's been used in astronomy for years. That's how they discovered Pluto. They take 2 different pictures on 2 different nights, and they put them in a machine. Of course, now you can do it digitally, but in the old days, you put them in a machine, and it literally blinks them back and forth. And any object that has moved would appear to hop.
It's pretty intense.
It's a man-like animal.
When it's proven and the body's brought in, it's going to be looked at as the most important biological film ever. I mean, I really believe that.
Dr. Meldrum appreciates MK's enthusiasm for the subject, but suspects he might be reading a little too much into film grain. Still, his reading of the film leads him to the same conclusion. The footage is not consistent with a hoax.
I can go on and name muscle group after muscle group that are evident, clearly evident, even given the limited resolution of the film. Here's a very clear shot of a frame that was enlarged when the film subject was still fairly close to Patterson. And so it affords us an exceptional view of some of the details of the anatomy. We can see the major muscle groups, such as the gluteus muscles. You can see the shoulder blades, and in the film in motion, see the movement of the shoulder blades as the arms swing, as they glide beneath the skin. Another anatomical detail that can be determined in the film is the ratio of the respective limb lengths. And that's well outside the range of human variation.
According to Meldrum's calculations, the limb proportions are all wrong for a human in a suit. The arms are nearly as long as the legs. These details and the consistency of the film with the tracks cast at the scene make Meldrum wonder how it could possibly be a fake. But where this particular film is concerned, it seems that details are often in the eye of the beholder. even in the scientific arena.
Ready, go.
Good.
Dr. Daniel Schmidt is an expert in using video analysis to understand animal locomotion. Dr. David Daegling, the one wired for motion, is an anthropologist.
All right.
Together, they've scrutinized the Patterson-Gimlin film, and for them, it comes up short.
It's not a good piece of wildlife photography. It's an absolutely terrible piece of scientific imagery. The subject on the film always occupies a very, very small part of the frame. You've actually got to blow the image up. And when you blow the image up, that image quality is going to deteriorate.
Problem is the video's too difficult. You can't identify where the elbows are on that animal, or the wrists, or the shoulder, even worse, or the hip. It is virtually useless in determining specific anatomy. From this film, you can identify that there is an upright walking biped in that film that has arms and legs. In terms of the limb ratios, the speed, the stride length, nothing can be determined from that film. There's not enough data in it. And to make claims otherwise isn't scientifically valid.
We're about to go to the source, Washington's Cascade Mountains, where the Bigfoot filmmakers grew up. If the Patterson film is a hoax, there are 3 witnesses. The first, Roger Patterson, is dead. The second, Bob Gimlin, isn't talking. But what about the man in the suit? Over the years, several people have come forward and tried to claim this particular honor. We're here to meet Bob Hieronymus, who, as a young man, used to ride with Patterson and Gimlin. Bob claims that back in 1967, it was he who strode across Bluff Creek in Patterson's Bigfoot suit. And around here, there are a lot of people who will back up Bob's story. For a start, there's that walk.
People say I walk like Bigfoot anyway.
To his friends, Bob's role as Bigfoot is old news.
I've heard a lot of people say, can you believe that old Bob was really Bigfoot? That was a lot of people say that,
Bob says his secret wasn't much of a secret around here.
My biggest concern always was that somebody's going to shoot you,
That was my big concern wearing the suit.
That was my big concern all the time.
Everybody around here, after a few years knew that was me.
Oh yeah, we knew it was.
We all just everybody just kind of kept it quiet.
According to Bob, Roger Patterson approached him in the autumn of 1967 with an offer that was too good to pass up.
He wanted a pretty good sized guy, somebody that they could trust to wear this Bigfoot suit. They said that we'll pay you $1,000 and it'll only take about 10 minutes. So I was 26 years old at the time. I jumped on it,
After a trial run in Yakima, they all shook hands and agreed to rendezvous in California a few weeks later. They met up in Bluff Creek, home of the infamous Wallace tracks and numerous Bigfoot sightings.
The next morning we got up and they made coffee and saddled up the horses, put the Bigfoot suit on the back of one of the horses. We went seemed like about a half a mile from where they were camped up into this place where they had picked out before I got there to film the Bigfoot film. We unloaded the suit, and of course they helped me in it. It was in October, and I figured there'd probably be hunters. Most people go to the mountains and have a gun, it was so hot inside that suit, and the sweat was just rolling off me, and I was nervous, and a little bit claustrophobic. Roger told me to go over to this certain place and stand there. I got out there and waited, and he gave me the signal. He was sitting on one of my horse that he took down there, so he took the camera and kind of went like that, as you can see the film is shaky. I started walking out across there, and I walked, I don't know how many yards it was, and I turned, you know, the old Bigfoot look and looked at him and went on. All this time, you know, waiting for a bullet to crack through my butt. That was the end of it.
Good job.
I thought I'd done a pretty good job.
You done?
Millions of people have been fooled all these years. If they would have paid me the $1,000 like they promised, I would have kept my mouth shut.
Of course, there's no hard evidence to prove Bob's story either. No one has ever produced a suit. So, was Roger Patterson incredibly lucky, or an incredibly gifted hoaxer? In the end, experts on both sides of the equation agree. You certainly can't prove Bigfoot's existence, but you can't completely rule it out.
The bottom line is simply this: these footprints exist, these casts exist. Something is making them. I've come to the conclusion that we're simply dealing with a great ape.
There's a very strong will to believe, and I think part of it is people don't want the mystery solved. I think a lot of the public is just as happy to have it remain a mystery.
There is no way to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that there's such an animal without having a body on a dissecting table. We have to ask the question, if there's an animal out there, why haven't we found it? I don't see anything that is going to encourage me to quit my day job to go looking for these hairy giants.
After the break, Mars attacks. Or does it? Do the little green men really exist? And are they waiting to invade Earth? We look at the evidence for UFOs next.